You're listening to Alt-Election 2025, a national election broadcast series produced by stations across the country exploring underrepresented voices, emerging issues, and alternative perspectives in the lead up to Canada's federal election on April 28th. The initiative is supported by the Covering Canada Elections 2025 Fund in partnership with the Public Policy Forum, Rideau Hall Foundation, and the Michener Awards Foundation. Learn more at AltElxN.ca. And now, today's episode.
Happy Election Day. This is Kinza Zafar with Mia Johnson here at Toronto Metropolitan University's local campus and community radio station. We are hosts on the East Coast today, bringing you alternative coverage of the 2025 Canadian federal election. This is content you won't get anywhere else, giving you real-time updates, on-the-ground reports, and expert analysis from across the country.
Yeah, thanks, Kinza. MetRadio CJTM 1280 AM is based at the lovely Yonge and Dundas Square. We may not be by the sea like our West Coast folks in Sidney, who's going to be coming on shortly, but we do have great billboards, street preachers out all times of the day, and the best falafel truck on the strip. We are broadcasting from Toronto, located on the traditional territory of the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat people. It's also within the territory covered by Treaty 13 and the Williams Treaty.
Thanks, Mia. Now over to our friends at Radio Sidney. Over to you, Bill.
Hello and good day, everybody. Bill Collins here, and welcome listeners to Alt-Election 2025, your alternative coverage of the 2025 Canadian federal election. Thanks, gang. My name is Bill Collins, and I'm here with Peter Wainwright at the Radio Sidney studio at the Mary Winspear Centre in beautiful downtown Sidney by the Sea on southern Vancouver Island. We're broadcasting from the traditional territory of the Wasanich peoples.
That's right, Bill. As Canadians head to the polls today, we're witnessing what many analysts are calling defining moment for our nation's future.
Yeah, indeed, Peter. Since the 2021 federal election, when Justin Trudeau's Liberals secured their second consecutive minority government, we've seen notable shifts in Canadian voting patterns, but perhaps none more dramatic than what we've seen in recent months.
Bill, I think one of the really big things that's happening locally is that BC is being perceived as a battleground. And we've had the party leaders here in the last couple of days making a pitch, trying to convert, to flip some of the ridings. And we've had massive turnout at the advanced polls.
Yeah, that's sure correct, Peter. Polls are showing a significant shift in voters' priority, with many Canadians now focused on which leader they believe can navigate these challenging diplomatic waters.
So what we're seeing on Vancouver Island, the southern part of Vancouver Island has traditionally been held by NDP. A couple of the NDP MPs have decided not to run again. Those ridings are hotly contested.
Yeah, while these issues remain important, I think it's the perceived threat to our economic independence that has led voters to which party offers the strongest hand in dealing with our largest trading partner now.
One of the other things is that there was a recent poll that was done in our region asking people if they were voting differently than they had in the past. And roughly 50% of them said that they're voting differently than they did last time.
Yeah, it's true. Also, we had issues surrounding the whole integrity of our election process, as witnessed in the discussions around the Foreign Interference Commission's inquiry. This has certainly heightened awareness about external threats to our process. I noticed Justice Hogue's investigation into alleged interference of a previous elections have some Canadians reflecting on democratic integrity.
Yeah, digital campaigning is also evolved in response, Bill. Party messaging has rapidly pivoted to address these trade concerns, and with candidates highlighting their international experience and negotiating credentials.
Yeah, that's right. And all this comes at a time when younger Canadians are showing unprecedented engagement with economic policy questions, while older demographics remain focused on stability during uncertain times.
As we cover today's results, we'll be watching closely to see how these concerns translate into actual votes and what that will mean for Canada's approach to international trade and sovereignty moving forward.
Yes, so stay with us throughout the day, and later in the evening, we'll bring you results, analysis, and voices from across the country on this important day for Canada's future.
So next up, we'll take a look at some of the voter issues we've been tracking.
So I'm just going to jump in here. Now we're moving to an interview, but I think we're a bit early on the clock. Or is this right at 1 minute 35?
Yeah, so Peter, you and I have had a chance to discuss this a little bit. We had intended to bring in our local reporter who will be joining us perhaps later in the evening. We will sort that out. So right now, you mentioned, Peter, changes in demographics and what's happening on Vancouver Island and BC in general. It's quite interesting that in the final days of the campaign, both Poilievre and Singh have been in this region trying to shore up what they perceived as opportunities for improving their position vis-a-vis seat count.
Yeah, and also Carney was here as well in Victoria twice, actually, during the campaign. So it's certainly getting a lot of attention from the leaders. And we're seeing in the polls that some of the ridings are quite closely contested. And in some cases, it's actually a three-way contest.
Right on. Well, let's now rely on Bailey, our producer here, to give us an interview segment. Bailey, over to you when you're ready.
Thanks, Bill. So we have a interview from CFUZ in Penticton, and this is an interview with a first-time voter who is a U.S. immigrant in a local election.
I'm Claire Thompson from Peach City Radio, CFUZ, with a look at the race in the southern BC riding of Similkameen, South Okanagan, West Kootenay. My guest today is Caroline Goodjohn, who moved to Canada from the United States 20 years ago and became a Canadian citizen after our last federal election. This is her first opportunity to cast a vote in a Canadian federal election. So this is your first time voting federally in Canada. How does that feel?
It feels very exciting. I walked into the voting place and I was very excited. I saw people I knew and I got a sticker and I got a pin, and I just feel it feels like a privilege that a lot of people don't get or use. Some people choose not to vote, which is shocking to me.
Yeah, and so you voted early.
Yeah,
so
early.
That's nice. And what was your first impression of this Canadian federal election process compared to voting in the U.S.?
In the U.S., like we talk politics quite often in our house, and I think in the U.S. it's just so big and it takes over so many conversations. I think this election seems to be more like the US than I would say previous elections in Canada, or maybe that's because now I can vote and I'm getting more engaged and involved in it. But I would say it's exciting. I don't know. Okay.
And were there any surprises or things that stood out to you about the Canadian voting process?
Well, it's different because in the US you vote for the president or you vote for your senator, your representative, but here you're voting for your local representative, your party, who then, however, this election, I wondered if more people were voting thinking more about the party to become the prime minister. So I wasn't sure. I think this election is a little bit different than I think most. But again, being it's my first, maybe I don't know.
And I mean, there's definitely a lot of talk about strategic voting and that sort of thing this election.
More than
sure.
I would say previous ones, it sounds like.
Yeah, so that was the difference. Do you find Canadian political parties easier or harder to align your values with compared to in the States where there's really just the two main parties?
Yeah, my husband and I talk about this, and we were saying how in Canada it seems like the left and the right are, the gap between them and all the parties is smaller than I would say in the US. In the US, the left and the right are very extreme, and I would say more polarizing versus it doesn't seem that it's that extreme here in Canada.
And do you find, whereas in the States you might be looking at just two candidates for president, two parties,
is 19 now, and so this is her first election, her first election period. And so she was saying about voting, yeah, she wants to do her own research, because I think back to when I first voted in the US, and I was just chatting with my mom, and like, well, I voted along with my parents versus doing, now we'd be opposites, right? So which I'm proud of her, she wants to do her own research, and I think that's great.
And it must be interesting with both of you being first-time Canadian voters and being able to see that experience from both sides.
Very, very exciting.
Yeah. And so what does being Canadian mean to you now that you're participating in one of the most fundamental democratic rights? Do you feel like you have a different feeling about being Canadian, or like you mentioned earlier?
Well, okay, I just became a citizen. So I was a permanent resident before, which felt like I was a part of Canada, but I feel like this is the ultimate, where you get that right to actually choose who your leader is. It's a pretty significant, I would say, power and right. Like even in the US, I haven't given up my citizenship. And one of the reasons is because I could vote. Like I like that, being able to have my say in who governs us.
So has becoming a voter changed how you engage with Canadian news and politics? Do you feel like you're looking at
I'm more
news?
involved in it, I would say. Yeah, I want to listen to the debate, and I want to hear what's happening more, because it feels that I could actually have an impact on it.
I want to thank you for having a conversation with me today. It's interesting to see the perspective of a new voter in Canada and how that impacts your feeling of being a citizen and the whole process. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
That was Caroline Goodjohn sharing her thoughts as a new Canadian citizen voting for the first time in a federal election. I'm Claire Thompson from Peach City Radio, CFUZ in Penticton, BC.
And now we're back with our East Coast lead, Mia and Kinza.
Thanks, Bailey and CFUZ, for that interview on new voters.
We are just hours away from what some are calling the most important election of our lifetime. You've heard it from politicians, advocates, friends. Advanced polls hit a record high over the long weekend. According to Elections Canada, an estimated 7.3 million Canadians took advantage of the opportunity to vote early. That is a 25% increase from the 5.8 electors who voted in advance during the 2021 election.
Yeah, Kinza, the stakes are really so high this election, with all the chaos happening south of the border. As Bill and Peter told us, Canadian nationalism has been on the rise. But as sovereignty becomes a unifying cause, this demographic has received the least attention on the national stage. That's First Nation, Inuit, and Métis people. The issues that impact Indigenous communities have been kind of sidelined by the two major parties. Apart from conversations around pipelines or mineral extraction, matters like treaty rights, Mi'kmaq, fishing rights, cross-border mobility are noticeably absent. Pierre Poilievre ignores the concerns of First Nations people in BC by allowing Aaron Gunn to run in North Island Powell River, a candidate who's made comments in the past denying that Canada participated in a genocide against Indigenous people, while NDP MP Nikki Ashton for Churchill Kiwak-Nook-Aski in Manitoba, who has been a strong voice for Northern and Indigenous communities, called out Mark Carney's company Brookfield for ignoring Indigenous peoples in Canada in the past. Carney also declined one-on-one interview requests with APTN News. That's Canada's Indigenous News Network, for those who don't know. A lawyer with ties to Walpole Island First Nation on Kijiwangnong territory says her people remain high in homelessness, food insecurity, poverty, and much more. But no party has reached out to her for an interview to speak about the issues that are impacting these Indigenous communities.
Joining us now is Arlene Dodge, the Executive Director of the Native Canadian Centre in Toronto, an Indigenous Community Centre at Spadina and Bloor, and Toronto's oldest Indigenous organization. Here's Arlene.
Thank you. Thank you, Kinza. My name is Arlene Dodge. I'm the Executive Director of the Native Canadian Centre of Toronto, and thank you for having me. So the Centre provides services and programs to the Indigenous peoples of the Toronto area.
Awesome. What do you think is sticking out to you most about this federal election compared to last elections?
No, I just think that there's maybe not that real commitment to Indigenous issues. There's no conversation. no one has reached out to, like our organizations to say, let's have a sit down and a talking circle and, let's hash out some of these, what's on your wish list or what are your needs within the community?
What are some of the issues that you think aren't being focused on or talked about by these candidates?
I really think that there is a deep history between Canadians and Indigenous peoples with respect to treaty rights. And I think, that really lays the foundation as to how our relationship was going to progress and how we would have a sharing of all resources. And that just doesn't seem to be how it's played out. Our people remain, high in homelessness, food insecurity. There is a high rate of poverty, violence. We are constantly, dealing with systemic racism issues, and the list just goes on and on. And there needs to be some consultation between us and the government to say, what are the issues? How can we help? Not so much as, here's some money, try and do what you can with it. No, there needs to be some real conversation as to how we can come together and, be a society that takes care of its own people, whether it's Indigenous or anyone else.
What have you heard from people that you're working with at the center? If you could share, do they kind of echo the same things?
When you were talking about crossing the border, that's while it's an issue and it always has been an issue for us because those are not our borders. It's severed our families when those borders were created. So that's been a long-standing issue, and it will remain a long-standing issue. So it just adds insult to injury, and it's just a constant. How do you remedy that? How do you fix that? I don't know. It's going to take a lot of people to come to the table.
That was Arlene Dodge from the Native Canadian Center in Toronto. Thank you for joining us.
Now over to Bob Jonkman from CKMS Radio Waterloo for an opinion segment on candidates there and community radio.
I'm Bob Jonkman from CKMS-FM Radio Waterloo. For the 3 weeks leading up to this election, I've produced a show called Meet the Candidate. We extended an email invitation to all 31 candidates from Waterloo Region to come into the studio. This was not an interview or a debate, but 25 minutes of unstructured free time on live radio. Candidates could present their party platform, the local issues they'll tackle, the reason they're running, or anything else they want to convey to their constituents. Of the 31 running in Waterloo Region, 16 candidates came into the studio. In addition, 3 candidates responded, but to decline, and 2 more would have participated, were unable to come in, one because of their day job and another due to illness. The candidates who declined the offer of free radio time makes as interesting a story as those who accepted. I had thought that 25 minutes of radio time would be a great opportunity for all candidates to get the word out, especially since we made both audio and video of the shows available to use in their campaign under a Creative Commons license. So I was surprised that only half the candidates accepted the offer. I'm baffled by candidates who declined or ignored my invitation. The people who run mainstream media and all candidate debates already don't invite the fringe or independent candidates to their events. So I expect those candidates to jump at the chance to be on radio, especially since they could use the recording in their campaigns. As it turns out, all the independent candidates accepted the invitations, as did the candidates from the United Party and the People's Party of Canada, after a bit of prompting from another PPC candidate. 2 candidates from small, that is, fringe parties accepted, but weren't able to come in due to their job or illness. As expected, none of the 5 Conservative candidates even responded to my invitation. I don't understand their campaign strategy of abstinence. Conservative candidates don't come to the all-candidate meetings or debates either, except for the one that's run by the Business Association. That left only candidates from mainstream centrist parties. Of the 2 of the 5 incumbent candidates, only 2 of the 5 incumbent candidates appeared on Meet the Candidate, only 2 of the 5 Liberal candidates, and only 2 of the 5 NDP candidates appeared. 3 of the 4 Green Party candidates appeared, and there were no candidates at all from the Cambridge riding, and that truly surprised me. Yes, Cambridge is at the edge of our radio signal, but we stream worldwide on the internet, and all the recordings are online too, so listeners can still get their message. Community radio has an audience that is distinct from mainstream media audiences. Community radio audiences tend to be more active in their community, as well as being politically active. And I believe community radio audiences tend to be voters. This is an audience that candidates should not be ignoring. Kudos to the candidates who did come into the studio, especially those who were first-time candidates and that had never been on radio before. Just appearing on the radio shows a level of commitment to being a candidate that voters appreciate. As a voter myself, I know how I feel about candidates who ignore their constituency. If you want to catch up on the Waterloo Region candidates who appeared on Meet the Candidate, you can go to radiowaterloo.ca/MTC. I'm Bob Jonkman from CKMS FM Radio Waterloo, reporting for AltElxn 2025.
That's excellent. Thanks, Bob, for that opinion piece. We're live here on the election day, Peter Wainwright and myself in the Radio Sidney studios. And right now, I would like to call on our intrepid folks from Nanaimo to give us some election views from that part of the world.
Well, thanks, Bill. It's Arby here. Jesse isn't here at the moment, but he will probably be here on election night, I'm thinking. We have a rather strong group of candidates, an incumbent, an NDPer, and a former, what do you want to call it, a former incumbent? A previous person running against who has occupied that seat before. Both strong candidates. That is the Green Party candidate, Paul Manley, by the way, that's coming back into the federal scene. He's been a councillor here in Nanaimo since losing the last election to Lisa Marie Barron from the NDP. There's obviously some concern that that's going to split the vote on the left side, and that could be quite the issue. Although I don't see that as going necessarily to the Conservatives, that might actually benefit the Liberals more, because as far as I know, the Conservatives were number 4 last time, and the Liberals number 3. So, that's sort of the way things are going here. We'll see how it plays out when the polling is finished.
Thanks, Arby. That's great. We've had similar changes, or expect similar changes from here. We'll see how later in the evening how that unfolds. Now I'd like to throw it back over to our colleagues in the East Coast. Take it away.
Thank you. Heading more east, actually, let's check in with our AltElxn radio colleagues at CHSR in Fredericton, New Brunswick, who connected with some unhoused folks about how they're voting in this federal election. Let's take a listen.
Hello, I'm Aidan Keenan, CHSR 97.9 FM's broadcast journalist, reporting from Fredericton, New Brunswick, with a look at a demographic that is traditionally underrepresented in voter turnouts, that being residents of homeless shelters. Here's Warren Maddox, the executive director of Fredericton Homeless Shelters, Inc., discussing the ways that his shelters encourage residents to get out and vote.
It's an interesting election. We're highly supportive of elections. The shelters always have been. We make sure that there's a polling station within 60 feet of the shelter's door. We have our consent, our forms to verify someone's address. So, as long as they have an ID in that form that says, yep, they're a resident of the shelters, they can vote. It's really important, especially for vulnerable people, the vulnerable sector, to be able to vote, to have a voice. So we go out of our way to make sure that happens, both with Elections Canada, and then I sit on an advisory board for Elections NB. So voting is really important, and irrespective of whom you're voting for, the fact that you get up and go out and vote is critical. It's our country. It's part of what we do. And it's, in my honest opinion, it should be a mandatory thing. Like if you don't vote, then there better be a good reason. Otherwise, get your butt off the couch and go vote.
Warren described how residents of Fredericton's homeless shelters might differ from other voters in their political priorities.
A lot of the people, they're living day to day and trying to survive. what a bunch of wanks in Ottawa say really doesn't make a whole lot of difference to you. You know, they're looking for consistency. I think they're patriotic and have no intention or desire to become American. They want basically a chance to live a good, healthy life. And whoever has the opportunity to deliver that to them is who they should vote for, whether they believe that to be, a conservative person or a liberal person or NDP, Green. There's even a communist guy in town. I'm surprised. I looked at things. Yeah, a communist guy. That's got to be a tough road to hoe. But whoever it is, that you need to have your say and your ability to speak and say, I need this. Where's the support that we need to make this happen?
This is Aidan Keenan for CHSR 97.9 FM in Fredericton, New Brunswick.
Thank you to CHSR and Fredericton, New Brunswick for sharing that segment with us.
Well, it's been a fascinating ride, Peter.
Yeah, it certainly has. With the campaign pivoting multiple times in response to announcements, daily coming from Trump to the south.
Yeah, it's certainly been interesting. I don't know about you, Peter, Mia, and Kinza. Are you seeing a change into how people are engaged in this election, particularly from the younger demographic? Have you seen that at all?
Yeah, it's actually been incredible. We had a polling center right in the student center where our station is located right next door. And it was incredible to see so many people our age going out to vote and engage with democracy this season.
Yeah, the news coordinator here at the station, Gabriela Ponte, and I went out to speak to some of those advanced voters that were coming out of the polling stations. And a lot of them were saying to us how important it is to vote, how important it is to use your privilege to vote. I think young people are a lot more engaged with what's going on. And I think that they're talking about how much is on social media and how things are coming up. But yeah, it'll be interesting to see how things turn out tonight. Stay tuned for some real-time updates, on-the-ground reports, and expert polling analysis. We'll be starting at 8 p.m.
That's it from us. Welcome everybody to Election Day coverage. Get out and vote. Don't forget, if you have last minute to be able to do that, from Peter and Bill from West Coast, and Mia and Kinza from the East Coast. And thanks very much for listening.
And get out and vote.
Go vote. Go do it.
This episode is part of the Alt Election 2025, a national collaboration bringing diverse voices and critical conversations to the airwaves ahead of Canada's federal election. Don't forget to tune in to our live National Election Night broadcast on Monday, April 28th, and visit AltElxn.ca for interviews, resources, and local station listings. A big thanks to our sponsors at the Covering Canada Election 2025 Fund, made possible through the Public Policy Forum, the Rideau Hall Foundation, and the Michener Awards Foundation. Thank you for listening. We'll see you on Election Night.